I know all of you will have questions and comments and so on. We will have time for Q&A at the end, but first of all, I'd like to just hand over to the party leader, Brendan Howlin, who's going to give us a special address now.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Ivana, and thank you all speakers for an insightful set of contributions. Can't say entirely optimistic, but I think very encouraging. Brexit will impact on all of us. It will define the next decade or more. To the people of Britain, it'll have the most direct impact, severing long-nurtured ties with the European continent and bringing even more doubt to people and to communities already unsettled by globalization. To the other member states, the impact will be different. More questioning of our shared European project. That's inevitable. And the causes of Brexit will continue to cause disaffection all across the continent. For us here in Ireland, we too face those challenges. But we're also forced to confront our worst fears about the border that stretches from Lough Foyle to Carlingford Lough. I grew up a long way from the border. Wexford is actually 150 miles from Newry. And culturally, in the 1960s, it was light years away. Growing up in Wexford, even in a very political household, the North was something discussed almost in abstract terms. It represented an oppression, or maybe an ambition, or simply a faraway place. During my lifetime, the landscape of this island and our relationship with our neighbours has changed utterly. We've moved from peace to war, and from war back to what we believe to be an enduring peace. The peaceful, if unsatisfactory, settlement that existed in the 1950s erupted, as we all know, in violence in the 1960s. 3,500 people were killed, and more than 50,000 people maimed during 3 decades of violence. That violence persisted, even as Ireland and the UK entered the European Union together and began inching towards a relationship of equals that Hannah has indicated. In 1998, of course, the Good Friday Agreement created a framework for peace on this island. Some now suggest that one party or one individual was largely responsible for that peaceful settlement. But in truth, we were all part of it. A messy political compromise led to peace, which shouldn't surprise us. It's always like that. There were, of course, leaders, giants of this island. They included the recently deceased Peter Barry in the 1980s, Albert Reynolds, Dick Spring. They took up the mantle in the 1990s, alongside John Hume and David Trimble and Bertie Ahern. In the end, even Gerry Adams and Ian Paisley found their way to peace. Those are names we remember, but there were many, many more who played a part. Monica McWilliams, Pearl Seeger, Breed Rogers, and Dawn Purvis are just some of the women who we're inclined to forget. For 17 years after the signing of the Good Friday Agreement, an initially fragile settlement took hold and grew roots. Every so often, some event would lead to the suspension of the Assembly or a standoff again between Sinn Féin and the DUP. But peace endured. Economic prosperity reached most parts of the island, and it was transformational. And our relationship with Britain started to look like a mature relationship between two nations. And when the Queen uttered her cúpla focal in Dublin Castle, we were all forced to pause and realise just how far we would come. We know better now than to be complacent. Maintaining peace and reconciling ourselves with a violent past is and will continue to be a process. And we woke up last June on the morning after the Brexit vote. And suddenly, we were once more faced with causes for concern. Concern about the fragility of our lasting peace. I speak about the North tonight because I'm struck about how absent the impact on Ireland is from the British debate. I'm even more struck by how absent Ireland seems to be from the thinking among those who will negotiate Brexit on behalf of the EU. And despite what Hillary says, it's not the impression I'm getting. Michel Barnier, the chief negotiator for the EU, held his first press conference last week. He set out his formal speech, the 4 principles for negotiation. Put simply, the 4 principles are the unity of the EU, the protection of those within the EU, the indivisibility of the freedoms of the single market, and no negotiations prior to Article 50 being triggered. Ireland didn't get a mention. Now, as Hillary has said, Barnier did separately, in response to a specific question, say that the EU would do its utmost to preserve the Good Friday process. But that there is a question about whether it can be preserved should give us all pause for thought. It's reasonable, I think, to be worried about negotiations taking place between parties that pay little attention to the impact of their negotiations on this island. An absence of a discrete negotiating position that recognises the vulnerability of peace is, in my view, a careless one. And when the British Prime Minister refers to red, white and blue Brexit, it's pretty clear she hasn't given much thought to the green, white and orange that flies over much of this island. Thankfully, the House of Lords, at least, seem to have a better sense of the dangers that could lie ahead. Their EU committee has noted that the impact of Brexit on the Republic of Ireland will be more profound than for any other member state. They point out that Ireland now faces challenges that are not of its own making. They also argue, correctly in my view, that we cannot allow Northern Ireland to become a collateral damage of Brexit. To make sure this is not the case, as I've said before, we have a responsibility to all the people on this island. It is clear those in Northern Ireland, in my view, are being sidelined in the British preparations for Article 50 negotiations. A casualty of those who are pushing for hard Brexit. They should not find themselves similarly locked out of Ireland's preparations. When Article 50 is triggered, we need to be ready. This is made harder, of course, by the fact that, as Colm Eastwood has noted, nobody knows what Brexit actually means. An absence of an explicit recognition by Michel Barnier of the issues facing Ireland is worrying. Worrying, as I've said, because of the risks to all the work that has been put in over decades in establishing peace. But equally worrying for other reasons. The economic impact on Ireland as a result of Brexit will be significant, as we've heard in graphic detail from Julie. Irish trade with the UK amounts to €1 billion each and every week. Over the last fortnight, we've seen a spate of reports that spell out some of the economic risks. The German Chamber of Commerce reported last week that Ireland will suffer most from the market volatility and unpredictability that Brexit brings in its wake. Our own ESRI has found that Ireland would lose 4% of its total exports under the hard Brexit outcome. Now, 4% is huge. It would hit most in the job-intensive sectors that Julie has talked about, such as agri-food and tourism. 4% of our exports in 2015 would have amounted to €4.5 billion. As Ireland's economic recovery takes hold, as our people finally start to feel some relief after actually a lost decade, this couldn't come at a worse time. That's why we've argued for advanced planning on the European side. We argue for the expansion of tools such as the European Globalisation Fund, which should be mobilised to support those sectors impacted by Brexit. Our government has been silent on these points. That's why we will also argue that Ireland must take up the opportunities that Brexit will offer to some of our sectors. We will argue for answers to these economic questions. In the meantime, the risks to our economy are the reason why we in the Irish Labour Party support the efforts being made by our colleagues in the British Labour Party to prevent the hard Brexit option. As Hillary is doing here today, Keir Starmer visited Dublin last month. We appreciate their solidarity with Ireland on these issues. Hillary has outlined his views here this evening and throughout the day in the media. He's been open to hearing in direct talks with us about the risks to Ireland and is committed to continuing, as he has done already tonight, to work closely with us to mitigate these risks. I was delighted to see our colleagues in Westminster secure a significant climb down from the Conservatives, as we've heard last week. The Labour Party got the House of Commons to agree that the British government will have to publish their plan for Brexit before triggering Article 50. At least then, we might begin to see the details of Brexit means Brexit and what that actually means. After that, the negotiations will last for a while. 2 years, we thought initially. 18 months, according to Michel Barnier, now seems more likely. The negotiations will only lead to an interim arrangement. But still, at the end of that time, the United Kingdom will face a choice once again. I'll argue, as I did at the British Labour Party conference, that the British people should once more get a say at that point. Last weekend saw the publication of 2 more opinion polls in Britain. Both were clear. The British people will not support a Brexit which damages their own economy. That fact makes me more determined on this point. In my view, the Brexit campaign was won by deceit and untruths. And when the lies have been proven, when the 350 million euros a week for the NHS fails to appear, the British people should have a chance, an opportunity to say once more what they feel. Because the ramifications of the deal will be with us for generations to come. The British people should get a vote with full knowledge of exactly what sort of deal is on the table, what type of border will be created on the island of Ireland, and answer to all the other open questions that would form a very long list indeed. What we have in the meantime is a dialogue of the deaf, where both sides speak at each other, but nobody really hears. Those in Europe must realise that what the UK will demand is very far from what the EU wants to offer. Those in the United Kingdom must realise that Europe will not just give them everything they want, and listening to them in direct dialogue, I don't know whether it's an arrogance, but of course we will get the deal. And that's where Ireland, I believe, has a critical role to play. A side effect of the Brexit vote has been some chatter about an Irish exit from the European Union. That's not what Labour wants, and it's not what the Irish people want. One columnist and a small minority of people in an opinion poll do not constitute a movement. And the Irish media needs to be cautious about giving oxygen to a fringe in Irish society. We've seen in the UK and in the US the danger of giving populism a free ride. I know Aon, I don't know whether he's here today, but I think he wrote to RTE last night after looking at the Claire Byrne show on that very point. In truth, there's been no rush towards exit by the Irish people. For all its flaws, and there are many, and we could each recite them, the support of the Irish people for the European project remains strong. That, however, should not be taken as an agreement with those who argue for more Europe as the solution to the current malaise. Those of us who champion the European Union must also be at the forefront of reforming it. Because a Europe that drifts further from meeting the expectations of our people, as we've heard very succinctly, cannot hold. I've argued for some time that we need to make much greater investment in our societies so that we can deliver as politicians, and our delivery must match the legitimate expectation of our people. We need to make investments which will be felt by people across Europe, investments that makes a noticeable material difference to people's lives, investments in hospitals and nursing homes, in roads and in trains, in schools and in sports centres. All of these are in essence investments in our people. And in my judgment, these policies will help us meet the challenge of rising populism. Too often over the past number of years, the belief that only populist politicians have answers to public fears has gone unchallenged. We've left the field to them. We must meet this challenge to democracy by providing people with real and workable and practicable answers. We're too constrained from doing so right now by some of the strictures of the Stability and Growth Pact and by the fiscal rules. In the main, this is because what the rules require of our states is that we measure fiscal performance, but not social measures. Why do we have a set of rules that measure our debt to GDP ratio, but don't require any routine monitoring of basic poverty levels? Why do we focus on fiscal medium-term objectives, which most people glaze over hearing, but not on the health of our environment or even the health of our people? As we speak, the rules that govern the European Union are forcing government inactivity. And this is at a time when people across the continent, as we've heard, are crying out for action from government. The Irish Labour Party has begun two pieces of work in this area. Domestically, we've drafted a piece of legislation, a genuine progress indicators bill, which we'll launch early in the new year. It will require, as a matter of law, that we publish a national set of indicators each year, indicators much broader than simply the size of the economy. By looking in the round at the social progress of our people, at the state of our environment, at the health of our economy, we can better measure whether government is serving us well. Well, now, there's probably little doubt about that question at the moment. Our current government produced less legislation in this session than the greatly reduced Labour Party did. But in the longer term, the performance of a government will and should be a source of national debate. Reforms should be driven not by anecdotal failures, but by an honest assessment of what we do well and what we don't do well, making sure that social progress matters just as much as economic progress. That's one step towards achieving our objectives, because social progress is what matters to people. As social democrats, we need to once more connect what we do with what our people want. And even with the best intentions in the world, Ireland couldn't achieve that real social progress on our own. The European rules that currently prevent additional capital spend are, in my view, daft. So 10 days ago, I raised this issue with the leaders of social democratic parties across Europe. We agreed collectively to a sensible process that will hopefully bring about real change. At my suggestion, a group of economists and fiscal experts will meet early next year, and they will draft a set of proposals to modify the Stability and Growth Pact, including the fiscal rules. These changes will not undermine fiscal discipline, but should add an urgency to investment in our people and in our societies, and place the monitoring of social good on a par with monitoring the economic strength of our countries. To prevent Brexit contagion from spreading across this continent, this, I believe, is the sort of action we absolutely need to take. And I invite Michael Noonan and Enda Kenny to do something similar with the Christian Democrats, and Micheál Martin with the Liberals. And all of this then brings me to the role I believe the Irish Labour Party needs to play in response to Brexit. Domestically, we will focus on three themes that I've spoken about tonight. Protecting Northern Ireland so their economy does not become collateral damage. I believe it could easily become that if we turned a blind eye. And so that a young lad now growing up in Wexford does not see the north as a faraway place. Responding robustly to the economic challenges raised by Brexit, so that a move to appease a conservative hardliner in Surrey doesn't destroy the lives of workers in Strabane. And arguing for a Europe that our citizens can connect with once again, one which our people can believe in once again, one that will help them realize their own life ambitions and that for their families, so that election results start to look more like Austria and less like Italy. To work this, we will work might and main to broaden the debate here in Ireland. And tonight is just the start of that process. I've sought and will continue to fight for the Taoiseach to provide weekly updates on Brexit preparations to Dáil Éireann. Next month, we will publish a discussion paper as a party to seek to involve more and more Irish people in planning and understanding what lies ahead. And as the months go by, this debate will broaden and deepen. The Labour Party will stand at the centre of it. Internationally, we will stand with our sister parties across the European Union. We are an international family of Social Democrats. As a family, we mourn together when we lose, and we celebrate together when we win. But on this, the most decisive issue to confront our continent, probably in our lifetimes, we must do more than we usually do. Gathering occasionally to reflect on the state of Europe won't be enough. We need to be bold, we need to be determined, and we need to act together. In doing so, we will make Europe work. Next February, the PES leaders will gather again in London for a special discussion on Brexit. We will argue for greater public investment in what our people need, as I've outlined, for a relaxation of the rules that restrict states from making those vital investments now, and we will work to reinvigorate a social view of Europe. We need to rekindle the idealism that saw from the ashes of war the potential to build a continent of equality, prosperity, and peace. Thanks very much indeed.